Good evening, everyone. My name is Cathy Rawls, and I am one of the Assistive Technology coordinators for Henrico County Schools. And tonight we're going to talk about all things AT. Henrico provides assistive technology for students with disabilities who have an IEP or a 504 plan. So let's talk about my favorite subject and jump right in. We're going to start with the definition of assistive technology, and the official definition is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, customized, or just fabricated from scratch, that's used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a child with a disability. Now that's a big, long definition, and what does that really mean? Well, that means really AT is any tool that helps a student learn, show learning, or complete tasks. It can be as simple of a device as a magnifying glass to enlarge something, a switch that operates a toy, all the way up to a complex device that's computerized or eye gaze for a communication system, and anything in between. So common tools that you may use can be considered AT when you need that tool to accomplish a task. Some great examples of AT that we put up here on the slide. We've got pencil grips and word prediction, graphic organizers to support writing, Google Read and Write. We've got social stories, iPads, and Google, timers, things of that nature, visual schedules. I threw duct tape up here because I think duct tape can be considered AT. If you duct tape something down so a student can access it and keep it in place for that student, it's a great thing to use so that he can access it, and it can be considered AT because he might need that to keep that item in place. So why do we use assistive technology? So AT supports increases a student's opportunity for education, that social interaction, and independence. It helps that student that has disabilities learn the material in a way that they can understand and access it. It helps eliminate those barriers that students might face that prevent them from being on the same level as their classmates. So it kind of levels that playing field. It makes it possible for individuals with disabilities to take part in the life's activities, maybe at home, school, or work. And so that person may not be able to develop those skills, so it helps them overcome those barriers. For example, a person may not have the use of her voice, but AT can allow her to communicate her thoughts and wants and needs. So let's talk a little bit about how AT can help your student. AT functions to bridge that gap between a student's current skills and the skills he or she needs. Common areas might include daily routines and activities, social skills and behavior, sensory, fine motor skills, communication, handwriting, spelling, reading, math, and written expression. So those are all areas of need. What we want you to know, so students and their families and caregivers are often the greatest advocates for AT use. Including students and families in that AT decision-making process ensures that students' preferences are honored, and it increases the likelihood that that device will be a good match to suit the student's needs. And when students and families have knowledge about AT, and how it can be used, they're better advocates for use in school and home. Students really need to be encouraged to use their assistive technology devices at home and at school. When should AT be considered? So AT should be considered for all students with disabilities annually during their IEP meetings with those team members. And AT supports, when you're considering AT supports and accommodations, those are things that all need to be trialed, and data needs to be taken so that it can be proven as a successful tool for that student. Once that's been trialed and decided upon that it's a successful tool, it can be added as an accommodation in their IEPs. Other times to consider AT, great times, are those transition times where you're going from early intervention to preschool, from preschool to school age programs, from middle to high school, and you're starting your student maybe transitioning out. Those are all great times to consider AT and where they are in their educational journey. Other times to consider AT would be when the curriculum, you're talking about curriculum or testing decisions need to be made. Those are great times to talk about it. Typically, earlier is better for that because you don't want to decide that the student needs a support 1 month before they're supposed to take a test. They need to be practicing and learning how to use that tool all along. And basically just throughout the school year, you can consider AT for your students if you find that they're struggling to reach those goals or participating in class or communication. So all along the year, if you are seeing that students struggle, you want to maybe take a look at AT supports for that student. All right, the Virginia Department of Education has a considerations guide, and it's a great tool for IEP teams to use in determining the areas where a student might benefit or require AT supports. It prompts the team and kind of gives categories and a little checklist that you can go through that talks about the student's current AT needs, or if that needs to be changed or moved, or something else needs to be considered. And this is something that can be completed as part of the annual IEP. So how does the Assistive Technology Department in particular support the students at Henrico? So we provide software supports, things like Help Kids Learn, which is cause and effect software, Board Maker and Lesson Picks, which help with language boards and activities, Google Read and Write, which is a literacy software, and a lot of other different devices that we'll kind of go through later in the discussion. We also can provide assistive technology consultations. Again, if a team is noticing that the student is struggling with meeting their goals or participating in class, they can always contact us and ask for a consultation, and we can come in and collaborate with those teams to determine if AT could be used to really support that student. We also provide training to staff and families on the use of assistive technology. And we provide additional information, just background and research and things on our AT blog. And we also have the same information on our Schoology folder. So let's talk a little bit about AT needs and how they evolve over time. Assistive technology is a very fluid and dynamic process. It's not a one-size-fits-all because every student and every student's body is not a one-size-fits-all. And it's also not a one-and-done process. It's an ongoing fluid process. Students change and they grow over time. Their curriculums grow. They get more advanced. They get more demanding over time. And also, let's talk about how technology just explodes over time and it's becoming more mainstream, and it's becoming easier for students to get that, and more students are using more and more technology in the classroom. One thing to just note is that a lot of times students, especially when they reach kind of middle and high school, they're reluctant to use some of the assistive technology tools that are provided for them because they don't want to stand out. They don't want to look different from their peers. They want to blend in. And so the fact that technology is changing and growing and becoming more mainstream is a bonus because it's more normal to see and hear students dictating to Alexa or talking to Siri. And so that makes it a little more acceptable, and it makes it easier for us to incorporate assistive technology into a student's curriculum. So definitely encourage your students to use their supports. So some common supports, let's talk about what we might see in Henrico's classrooms. Under the category for augmentative and alternative communication, and we're going to get a little more detailed into these categories, but just to kind of briefly go over some of these different categories. So AAC If a student has difficulty with verbal speech, or if their speech isn't really understandable to those around them, some examples of things you might use with them would be a communication board or a voice output device. For reading, if a student's having difficulty understanding with reading comprehension, decoding, things like that, there are reading materials, there are predictable text, there's text-to-speech software, adapted books, things of that nature that you can use to support reading. For writing, if a student's having difficulty with those writing assignments, there are mechanical tools, pencil grips, writing special paper, lined paper that you can get to help them kind of stay in within the range of the paper. You can use word banks and walls, spelling and grammar checker. I'm a horrible speller myself, and I love the fact that now sometimes it just corrects it for me, and I don't even have to go back and edit it. It's all done for me. There's speech to text tools that you can do where students can dictate their writing and it can be printed right there out on the screen. And of course, word prediction to assist with those writing assignments as well. For computer access, if a student can't access their computer, there are other tools and assistive technology that can assist with that too. We have switches with switch interfaces that can allow a student to participate in activities on the screen. There's voice recognition software that can actually help you navigate opening folders and things on your screen as well. There's alternate keyboards and alternate mice that they can use that also help with computer navigation to access their materials. Learning organization and studying those executive functioning skills. Why would a student need that? A student that's struggling to really get their work done in a timely manner, who doesn't have a student like that, who has trouble staying on task and getting, remembering to study for that, oh yeah, that test is tomorrow, that kind of thing. There's highlighters to help highlight those special vocabulary words that they need to really go back and study and look at again or remember dates. There's printed notes that can be provided for them ahead of time. There's picture schedules that can help them transition to other tasks and activities. There's planners and digital calendars that can help them remember, oh yeah, that assignment is due this day and I need to study for that test tomorrow. Under math, if a student's having trouble with math concepts and goals, there's number lines, enlarged worksheets that they can have, and of course calculators for math support. So a couple of tools for those complex learners that have difficulty physically accessing their devices and their materials. We have some smaller message communication devices, a one message device or a 9 message device communication that can provide that quick access for communication. We have switches that can access toys for them to utilize in the classrooms for cause and effect activities. And of course, as I mentioned before, there's alternative keyboards and alternative mice that can help access the computer with a switch interface. There's mounting. We do actually use other things besides duct tape and Velcro to mount things. We use mounts that can clamp to the table and hold a switch or an iPad for a student so they can better access their materials. There's large button calculators for students with visual impairments and with fine motor who need a larger button to press. Just touching on some reading and writing supports for the students. So a question, could your student benefit from accessible instructional materials? So the following could help you kind of tease out if your student could benefit from that. If your student has a disability that interferes with traditional printed educational material, if your student has a reading accommodation for testing and classroom instruction, if your student is reading below grade level, these are all things that could point to it might be beneficial for an accessible instructional material. One of the tools that we love to use in Henrico is read and write software support, and it helps support a lot of aspects of literacy. It It provides literacy support tool that helps students understand, engage, and express themselves. And it offers support with those everyday reading and writing tasks and understanding unfamiliar words, researching assignments, and then editing that written work. It has a lot of really great features. One is, of course, the read aloud feature of text to speech. It can read different types of documents to the student. It has a really nice screen masking tool. Sometimes it's very overwhelming for readers. They find it difficult to have a whole paragraph or a whole page of text. And the screen masking tool kind of teases out just a few lines of text at a time, and they can move down with it and just read a few lines at a time instead of having that whole overwhelming page of text that they have to read. Dictation, if they're having writing issues and they need to dictate speech to text, it'll print it right there out on the screen for them. Another great feature for read and write, voice note recordings. If we have a student who has some speech, but it's not particularly clear enough for read and write to translate as a speech to text type of situation, then they can actually embed their message verbally, their audio message, into a document, answering questions on a worksheet, so to speak, and the teacher can access that and hear their answers and hear writing in an audio file instead of a printed file. Of course, word prediction is a great tool for writers to help them, kind of get over that hurdle of what comes next. Dictionary support. If a student comes across something in a document that they don't understand, they can click on the dictionary. There's also a picture component to the dictionary for students that also, again, have trouble with reading, the reading portion of it. Highlighter and vocabulary word features that are really nice. They can highlight those important things in a text and then kind of collect them all into a document for studying for later on as they go. And so those are all great tools that kind of meet the student where they are and also can grow with them as their academics grow. So AIM Virginia is a service that provides accessible instructional materials to eligible Virginia K-12 students that have an IEP. These accessible materials are in alternate print types of things. They could be in Braille, they could be an electronic audio file of the book read to them, and they're used by students who can't typically access traditional print formats. And research has said that using these accessible instructional materials can positively impact a student's performance by improving their grades, improving their test scores, and most importantly, just increasing their independence and their motivation, which is, very important, especially with reading and writing and communication too, is to give them that confidence and give them that independence that they can do the work and they can access their materials in a way that works for them and gives them that motivation to keep learning and keep moving forward. Every school has an AIM Virginia representative, and they can request textbooks and, for example, books that they might be reading in English class. They can request those in alternate formats for the students. So I'm going to send it over to Joyce, and she's going to talk more in depth about AAC, alternative and augmentative communication.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joyce Downs with Assistive Technology as well, but my background is I'm a speech-language pathologist, and I really specialize in the augmentative, alternative communication. Alternative communication can be anything from just gestures to facial expressions, but when we're talking about AAC for students, we're often talking about speech-generating devices. We are giving students the opportunity to communicate what they may not be able to communicate now verbally. This is for students not only who are nonverbal, but for students who are verbal, but they say most of their things in an imitation, or it's very scripted, or students that are verbal that we just are not able to understand their speech. So it's a great visual and auditory support for those students as well. AAC, the use of AAC has been proven to increase social interaction, school performance, and individuals' ability to interact with others.
Okay, back to me. So where to find more information about assistive technology? We have an assistive technology blog, as we mentioned before, that has a lot of information on there about all things AT. Another great place to look is commonsense.org. It has a lot of good resources for you. VDOE, of course, their assistive technology page has the considerations guide and a lot of good information. Also, TTAC, which is Training and Technical Assistance Center, is a regional program all across Virginia. There's 4 regions, VCU, JMU, ODU, and Virginia Tech, I believe. They all have these sites that provide training, provide supports and information for assistive technology. Okay. And we just to finish up, this is our team, Joyce Downs and Rachel Druff, myself, our grade assistant Eve Salke, and our leader Rebecca Hodel. So if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to contact us.